Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about the path of Kriya Yoga. So often people will talk about the path of Kriya Yoga, and it is often seen as a lifestyle or a certain way of being. And this is not just about Kriya Yoga, that there's other yogic paths, if you will, other yogic disciplines where people really become part of the path. And the thing about that is that they often put their identity into being a Kriya yogi or a yogi. And certainly people who are attracted to yogic paths and Kriya Yoga in particular are looking for something very specific. They may not be satisfied with where things are going in their life, their spiritual paths and so on, and they want something where they can make efforts to make some kind of spiritual gains, right? And that's all good, and certainly that motivates probably the majority of people who do Kriya Yoga and follow yogic paths to some kind of self-improvement, some kind of process, spiritual development and so on. They want to do something where they know it's going to work, where they're going to get clear guidance, where they're working with powerful techniques, spiritual development, if it's a closer connection with the divine, if it's an intensification of their spiritual path and so on. And certainly, that is a very laudable goal. Often in Kriya Yoga circles and yogic circles, people will take on Kriya Yoga as an identity, and it's that they identify with a particular lifestyle. They say, I'm on the path, the Kriya Yoga path, as if that is something that is separate from regular life, right? And certainly that's an attempt of people to separate the profane and the sacred, and they want to do something to enhance the sacred so that they can deal with the profane, or perhaps to balance them. And that makes sense. But it's not the identity alone that gives benefits in Kriya Yoga. And certainly I have seen my experience of Kriya Yoga with different paths and seen people who are very much into the identity, into the lifestyle of Kriya Yoga, into meeting with other people and practicing Kriya Yoga in a group and talking about it, and saying how connected they are, how compelling, their practices and so on, and talking about their guru and so on, right? So that's very sort of an identity focused. But Kriya Yoga, the essence of Kriya Yoga is different than that, right? That's an element of people who become involved in it. But people who do Kriya Yoga, it's really about the sadhana, right? And the sadhana is this recipe of Kriya Yoga practices developed by Lahiri Baba, Lahiri Mahashai, which is a very practical way that you can learn to get internalized, what we call pratyahara in yoga, and get into deeper states of meditation. And in some Kriya Yoga schools, they focus very much on a routine of the sadhana, of doing particular practices, right? So some do non-Kriya exercises, right? Ones that were not taught by Lahiri Baba, religiously, and then they sit down and they do other non-Kriya techniques, and then they get into the Kriya practices and so on, and then they sit there and they get into this routine. They must do it, this number of times per day, it must be for this number of Kriyas, etc., etc. And that is good at the beginning of Kriya Yoga to build the practices, to develop the routines, right? And to have some structure so you are consistently working to try and get results. But there's often a misunderstanding in Kriya Yoga and other yogic paths about the perspective of the actual practices themselves. And an example of this is the term pranayama. Now pranayama, prana means life force, yama means restraint or control. And pranayama is the primary practice in Kriya Yoga. It's a form of intentional breathing that brings the breath, brings a slow intentional breath that has an effect on the body to bring one into an interior state. And as we are doing the Kriya Pranayama, if we take the perspective that we're trying to control the breath, trying to control the life force, we are really setting up a dichotomy between ourselves as the subject and the breath, or prana, as an object. It's a subject-object relationship. Now we know that Lahiri Baba, when he had these experiences, these internal experiences, and he would be surrounded by his students, often tried to articulate what he was experiencing for their benefit. And so, for instance, if he had an experience of the kutastha, of the spiritual eye, he would say, I am the kutastha. Or if he had an inner experience of Krishna or Kali, he would say, I have become Krishna, I have become Kali. So that's a little different than a subject-object relationship. That is a perception, a merging with that concept or that manifestation of the divine. So definitely Lahiri Baba was diligently doing his Kriya Yoga, but there's an aspect of it that most people don't talk about in Kriya Yoga, is that he was one with those techniques that he was practicing. In Kriya Pranayam, he wasn't saying, I'm trying to control prana and prana does this, prana does that. He became one with it, meaning he was able to dissolve the boundary between his identity as Lahiri and the actual practice itself. He was able to merge with them, right? This sounds a lot like dhyan, right? Which is absorption. And then an intensified version of that, where the boundary between yourself and that concept of the divine disappears and you become one with it. That is samadhi. Instead of trying to control the life force as a separate object to be manipulated to get a result, you embrace the life force. And when you do your practice, you have a conscious communication with prana inside. Now, this is not something that is often taught or even talked about in Kriya Yoga, and certainly people who do well in Kriya Yoga are able to go beyond the subject-object relationship, dissolve the boundary between their identity and what they're experiencing, and merge with that, get into samadhi. But there's a very simple practice from Taoist internal alchemy that helps to fill this gap, right? This gap in the teachings of Kriya Yoga, and that is the inner smile. Now, I've talked about the inner smile in other videos. It's a Taoist internal alchemy practice that is really, really simple. You use the smile to embrace what you are experiencing during your meditation. And the inner smile is about feeling what you feel, accepting it fully, and giving consent for it to change. This is the essence and essential ingredient of internal transformation. It doesn't sound like much, but it really is. It is very profound, because it's usually the thing that stops people or prevents people from developing, because they have this barrier between what they're trying to direct and the thing itself. When you use the inner smile, you merge together with your inner experience. And whatever limitations or resistance you have internally to the flow of that prana, you dissolve with the inner smile because you embrace it. And so the inner smile is really, really simple. And an example of that is if you are doing the Kriya Pranayam, and as you're doing that intentional breathing, you smile into wherever your attention is and embrace what you're experiencing fully, accepting it fully for what it is, even if it isn't in a pristine state, even if you feel aspects of darkness or resistance in there, you embrace them even more. And what happens as a result of that is that you start to open up and you become absorbed in them, right? And absorption is that stage of meditation that goes beyond dharana, that internalized concentration, into an absorbed state. Subtle life force is manifesting and experiences start to manifest, where you start to have these inner experiences. And as you become more absorbed in them and to embrace them, the deeper your meditation goes, right? So this is a very deep practice from Taoist internal alchemy that can be applied to Kriya Yoga for great benefit. So I highly suggest you check out some of my other videos about the inner smile. Check out our website, modernkriya.com, where we've got many of those practices. There is a foundations page where you can learn about heart rate variability resonance breathing, where you can learn about, different aspects of Kriya Yoga, where you can also learn about the inner smile and other Taoist practices. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.